Good Monday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast with Rob Lewis and Austin Price and Brent Hubbs, Jesse Simonton on a little getaway for a few days here before we start fall camp and get things ready for football season for Tennessee. So he'll be back with us at the end of the week. But today it's just the three of us talking a little Vol football. We'll talk some recruiting. We'll talk some Vol hoops as well. Guys, it's kind of that time where it's there. You know it's coming, but it's like still a ways away, so it's interesting. There's not a ton of excitement, but you can start to feel a little bit of it building as practice is now just over a week away. I had somebody ask me this question over the weekend. I thought it was an interesting question, and he said, is everybody putting too much stock in Jim Chaney's arrival in terms of suddenly this team being talked about by some people winning 8, maybe even 9 football games, as some of the ESPN stuff has pointed out, and all that type of thing. What do you guys think of that?
I think that, to think that Jim Chaney's going to come in here with a magic wand and go woo and sprinkle the pixie dust and everything's going to be good is erroneous. Do I think, though, that he's had a nice impact? Yes. Do I think he's had a huge impact on, like, Jeremy Pruitt and taking some pressure off him and letting him just kind of be the CEO type person of the program instead of, like, the same thing with Ansley. I think those guys are just taking pressure off Jeremy. Offensively, I think, you're going to see it start slow and get better as the year goes along. I think the more Jim Chaney calls plays with this current roster, I think he'll get a better feel for what he has. I mean, it's one thing to be in spring, but to be out there with live bullets flying this fall, I think you get about 4 or 5 games in, he's going to have a really good feel for what everybody does really, really well, and then, kind of settle into the season. At least that's my take. I mean, maybe he comes out and it's just points aplenty everywhere. And I know, I don't count the Georgia State type games. I'm talking about legitimate opponents. But I think it takes some time to kind of settle in. But by, let's say, late October, like say the South Carolina game, I think Tennessee's offense should be running full steam.
It's interesting, Rob. I've got this in a story that we'll have later this afternoon on some of the Garantano-Chaney relationship stuff. I went back and looked at some of the numbers. In Chaney's first stops, at Pittsburgh when he had Nate Peterman, and then at Georgia when he had Jacob Eason, and obviously Tennessee when he had Jonathan Crompton. They averaged about 28 points a game. Crompton threw for 2,800 yards and nearly 30 touchdowns in his season here. Eason had a good year. Peterman had a good year at Pittsburgh. The only one that really struggled was Brandon Allen at Arkansas. Their numbers were not great in terms of what they put up. He threw a bunch of interceptions there. So I get where there's a lot of hey, we've seen this firsthand with what he did with Jonathan Crompton stuff, but it is interesting because he's been the most talked about individual, more than any player or anybody else. He's been the guy that's been most talked about. Part of it is because they're spending so much money, but also part of it is because Tennessee fans have seen it work before, so it creates a lot more anticipation with Jim.
Sure, but I think the hype is warranted just on his track record, and especially, I like his track record is not like putting up 40 points a game in the Big 12 against a bunch of junk defenses. I mean, he's had success in the toughest league in the country, and you've talked about it a lot. I don't think you can overestimate how valuable it is to have a guy that has competed in the SEC, has made his bones in the SEC. I mean, knows what it's like to play in this league. And another point you're fond of making, against so many proven defensive-minded coaches. I mean, especially at the biggest rivals on your list, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and I think Chaney's reputation is well earned. I'm like Austin. I don't think he's going to come in here and just wave a magic wand and suddenly everything's going to be better. But I'm not trying to disparage the guy, but going from Tyson Helton to Jim Chaney, that's a pretty massive upgrade. And something else, and the point you just made, I think that it completely frees Jeremy Pruitt up to worry about one side of the football.
Well, that and what you really hope happens is Chaney really is a nice complement to what these guys have matured into. You hope that there's been some growth and maturity in all of these players that you have back. You're kind of your talk the whole offseason, and the reason Tennessee's ranked so high in the FPI and all that stuff is that they have so many guys that have played that are returning. You hope those guys have continued to grow. Jim Chaney comes in uses their strengths well, and those two combinations marry together to see that improvement.
And I tell you another thing that is maybe probably not been talked about much, but I think has real value is his ability to manage his staff. Where Tyson Helton not only was first-time play caller or full-time play caller last year. It was also the first time that he was the boss of 5 other football coaches, managing egos, managing guys who. If you've gotten this far,
and Will Friend called plays, and all of a sudden he takes a back seat to this guy.
If you've gotten this far as a coach, I'm not saying you have a monstrous ego, but you probably have a lot of self-confidence and that you know how to, how you want to go about your business. And I think Jim Chaney is going to be able to manage his side of the staff at a level that Tyson Helton just wasn't ready for last year.
Yeah, that's a good point, and something you haven't talked about, because we talk about what's going to be the improvement of Jared Garantano because of his track record. What's he going to be able to do in terms of finding playmakers?
Dominic Wood Anderson.
With Dominic Wood Anderson, those guys. But what you haven't talked about is how much is he going to make Brian Niedermeyer a better position coach? Will Friend, and Will Friend's done it at the big time level, but I think we would all agree that. And I'm not saying Will Friend is Sam Pittman, but Sam Pittman's reputation certainly was enhanced a great deal by spending 4 or 5 years with Jim Chaney. Those two worked very well together. I think Sam Pittman will tell you Chaney made him a better football coach. Same for T. Martin as a position coach. I think that's a good point, Rob, because I do think that that's an area where it's not talked about how much those guys can be better coaches because of the way Jim works business. And again, no offense to Tyson Helton.
No, but he's first time.
But
young guy.
Right, he hasn't managed a staff before, and he hasn't delegated the way that you needed to, and he hadn't been stern enough at times, probably when you need to. Right. So that's an interesting point. Will be fun to see. I think the biggest question with Jim is, does he have enough tools in a toolbox to make the strides everybody's hoping that he would make? I agree. There's no pixie dust. Is there enough there for him to work with besides Dominic Wood Anderson? What can he get out of a Brandon Johnson? You know what I'm saying? What can he do with a guy like Cedric Tillman and those type of things? It's interesting because Denarius Moore was going to be, after his freshman year, Fulmer claimed, it's my next all-conference player, and he hadn't really done anything until that last year with Chaney and Kiffin. Same for Gerald Jones, who had been hurt. There was some talent there. Obviously, Moore was the more talented guy, but they created something out of that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Chaney can get out of guys and how much is there to get out of guys. Because that's the million-dollar question that everybody has. Look, there's nobody on the all-conference teams other than Callaway. How good is Chaney's talent on the offensive side of the ball?
And what can they get out of the offensive line? Because if they don't shore that up from last year, if they can't get 2 yards and they need to get 2 yards, all the skill in the world.
I do think they're going to be. I go back, and I know they're not going to be world beaters, but I just think a year ago the quality depth on the offensive line was not very good. I think quality depth is there, especially at guard. Jesse made this point a couple weeks ago. That one spot where they're kind of thin is tackle. I agree with that, but in the interior, chalking up Trey to being a starter. When you look at K-Ron and how much he's grown, when you look at other players that have played meaningful snaps, Jerome Carvin, Ryan Johnson, and that's the thing is you want, some of those guys that have actually been starters the last couple of years, you want those guys being your backups. That way when you fall, you're not falling, it's not a free fall. Because, Rob's right. If the offensive line can, if you just get everybody on that offensive line to say to be 10% better, how much better is this offensive line than it was a year ago?
Well, I think no question about that. I think the other thing, too, is schematically, how much can you help them? How much can you help them schematically manage the game? Now, the game's different than it was in 2009. We all know that things are changing. The landscape of this conference in terms of what kind of defense guys are playing is different. But how much can you schematically help? I'm not sure how much they schematically helped themselves last year with stuff. When you look, you're sitting there, you go to that West Virginia game, and it looks like this guy's made an obvious bust, and then, oh no, that's this guy, this is somebody else's fault, this, that, or the other. How much can they schematically help them survive? Where I don't know how much they, particularly the first 4 weeks of the season, I don't know how much they helped them. So I think that's going to be an interesting, to watch as well with Jerry Garantano having all the control that he says he's going to have. Will that continue? Lots of storylines on the offensive side of the ball, and I think the offense is going to be the side of the ball that everybody asks the most about, don't you?
Besides, I think people will ask a lot about the defensive line.
But don't you think with the defensive line and even with the offensive line, the answer is going to be, well, we'll just have to see when they get in the game. I do
think that's going to be the
experience. They got to have, they got to have the reps. They got to have this, that, and the other. Whereas offensively, there's much more talk about who's playmakers and that type of thing. But you're right. I mean, the defensive line, I think most people feel like the back seven is going to be okay.
Yep.
It's just what can you do up front. And obviously, while we're on this topic of the defensive line, Aubrey Solomon still has not heard anything.
You sure? Facebook said otherwise,
right.
Brent.
Well, Aubrey said nothing. The last time I checked, the NCAA wasn't making a lot of weekend rulings. They weren't having special committee meetings on Saturdays and Sundays.
That's just where everybody's at. Everybody's ready for football to start when, a random Joe Schmo Facebook page can get everybody so riled up, on a Sunday afternoon. It's time for football to start.
Well, look at the last two Sundays. You got Henry to Oto. Henry T's out there liking a couple of tweets and sends everybody in the
But see, that was
direction.
actually legitimate. I could see the concern there. But everybody gets worked into a lather about look, if how many times have you gone on Facebook? I don't think Rob does Facebook, but you get on there, you see what happens when you put rice in a boiling hot pot of water, and then people click on it and nothing happens. So it's I just don't get it.
That's true. That's interesting too as well. All right, so not a whole lot going on in football. Obviously, they're finishing up with some conditioning. We'll have more on that here in the coming days as well. Austin, coaches are back in the office. They're doing a lot of X's and O's stuff. But there's also getting ready to get ramped back up in recruiting. I put the note on the board about Bryson Eason. I think Tennessee is obviously pushing hard there, certainly has his attention. I think that couple duo/trio of Memphis guys that have talked about playing together, I think there's some reality setting in that they're not going to play together.
Well, they can, but again, are you really going to and I think the message from Tennessee's been hey, look, Bryson, we want you. You can go play with your buddies, but what looks better? You going to play with your buddies, or coming here? And I think that when the family starts getting involved, I think that the talks get real. And as much as I think that he and Martavis love to play together, I just how realistic is that? We put it in the war room last week. I don't think that they're some locked-in duo, but Bryson Eason and Amari Thomas are buddies. And, if they could work it out to play together, that would be something I think those two would like to do. Now, they're not as close as he and Martavis French, but I think that the thought of, coming to, quote-unquote, the bigger football school, even one that's not had the success that, some others have had in recent time, is more appealing right now than, picking play with your buddy.
And French is supposed to do something this week. We think tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
He may do something. Be interesting to see who that's going to be.
To me, it's either Arkansas or Mississippi State.
Yeah, I think it's Mississippi. I think it's Arkansas if I'm guessing. That's just a random guess. I don't know. I'm not talking to the kid. Bryson Eason wasn't allowing anything that way.
Well,
but it feels like Arkansas.
Well, yeah, and they're trying to make it, much like A&M. They're trying to get in the state. Trying to make a play in the state. SJ Tui, Sean Tui's kids over there working for Morris, and he's making, trying to make Memphis, Arkansas's personal playground. That's fine. I just you go back, Arkansas's, they're taking some kids, right now that could end up being really, really good football players. Mm-hmm. But there are also some question marks to their game. So a lot of that's going to be on development, and can he develop those kind of players? Unlike the way Bush Jones did here.
Well, and I think you look at it, for example, for Bryson Eason, I think the question is, with his size, is he a better fit linebacker-wise in Jeremy Pruitt's system versus John Chavis' system, which has always been leaner linebackers?
Yep.
The flip side to that, Tennessee didn't pursue Drew Francis. We'll see if that's the right decision or not the right decision down the road. But one of the intrigues with Arkansas, with Francis, is they do play lighter guys. They do play. From a body standpoint and a physical standpoint, Rob, you know this. You know Drew better than anybody. You've been around him since he was 7, 8 years old. He would seem to fit a John Chavis scheme more than he would a quote 3-4 scheme size wise.
Oh yeah, size wise, he just doesn't I mean, is not what Jeremy Pruitt's looking for. I mean, he's about 20 pounds, maybe even 25 pounds away. I mean, the kid can run. I mean, you can see why Chavis loves him. I mean, ran a 4.55 this summer, but has trouble keeping 205, 210 pounds on a 6'4" frame. And if he gets to 230, he's going to have a chance to make Tennessee really regret their decision. But it's a lot of. I mean, it's just a big if. I mean, he doesn't look like Quavaris Crouch or Henry To'oTo'o, or and he's an outside guy most likely. He certainly doesn't look like Darrell Taylor right now, but he does look like Darrell Taylor looked 4 years ago.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing.
But 4 years ago, Tennessee was recruiting Darrell Taylor to play off the edge all the time, not in this different position. And that's my point. And you're right. If Drew Francis gets the weight and keeps the weight staying on, there may be a lot of people who regret the decision not to recruit him harder than they did. I think when teams who are playing the scheme, look at it, they have a hard time seeing where he fits. I think if Bryson Eason is looking at Arkansas' scheme compared to Tennessee's scheme, I think he has a harder time seeing where does he fit at Arkansas. Because what's Bryson? You've been around Bryson. What's he weigh? What's he look like?
240.
I mean, he could end up being a defensive end over there.
Right.
Which is another Chavis staple, recruiting, turning linebackers into defensive ends.
And that's I think that's the fear for him. I think that's the fear for Martavis French. I think all those guys, they continue to hear, you're as big as a defensive lineman, and even though they play linebacker at Whitehaven. So, I mean, I think that's something that they're all listening to and hearing loud and clear. But I mean, Memphis is such a melting pot for like all these SEC schools. They're trying to get in there. Alabama tries to get in there. Arkansas is making a play. A&M's making a play. Mississippi State and Ole Miss, obviously.
And Tennessee's decided to make plays in there now because the previous staff did not recruit it very hard at all.
Yeah. So
Phillip didn't get everybody from there, but once the Alabama, once Logan Young and all that blew up.
Yeah.
I mean, Phillip I don't know. I wouldn't go so far as to say he owned it, but I mean, he started getting who he wanted out there more often than not.
Yeah, he started getting who he wanted for sure. So we'll see. Again, in talking to Bryson Eason, he's certainly feeling the Tennessee love, which has been a full court press from them the last few weeks. I thought it was interesting. I put this on the board. He's talked to Keyshawn Lawrence. Keyshawn Lawrence has been in touch with him. He knows Keyshawn a little bit. As you mentioned, Amari. He's talked to Melvin McBride. I mean, he was certainly feeling the Tennessee vibe on Sunday evening when I spoke to him for a bit. We'll have a story coming up a little bit later, but I don't know that he's on any kind of immediate commitment watch. But it will be interesting to see if he gets here this weekend.
If he gets here this weekend, this is the kind of thing. If French falls off the board, to me, it's easy to see.
A quicker decision.
Yeah.
All right. Who else? And look, this list is going to change a lot between now and Friday, probably. Who do you think? Who else do you think is going to get in here for this? Was it pool party / barbecue / luau, whatever we're going to call this thing at this point?
The main guys that are from out of state to me are Jalen Hyatt,
the wide receiver from over in South Carolina,
Dutch Fork over in Irmo.
Who, by the way, somebody tweeted out about him on Sunday, said he should be a lock for Mr. Football. Got a lot of high praise from a media guy over there.
Yeah.
But good friends with Bryce Thompson. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then Lenneth Whitehead, who's from Athens. I mean, he's a freakish athlete. Georgia's not going to take him.
Where's he play, position-wise?
Linebacker.
You think he's a linebacker all the way?
Yeah, he's more of an edge guy.
Okay.
Lord
knows they need those.
So I mean, like you look at, to me, out of state, those are the two big names that I think of that are guys that you really want to see what happens. I mean, obviously, Jalen's a guy that everybody's kind of pegged as a possibility to go this weekend. We'll see. Whitehead, you want to get him back here. I mean, I don't think he's doing anything anytime soon, but his mom, his family are important to him, and I think Kevin Scherer's done a nice job there. Where does Jay Hardy go this weekend? That's a big question. Same thing with Tyler Barron. Some thought that Tyler may go to Ohio State on an official visit.
Looks like Jay's probably going to come up here based on just kind of the rumblings in the water, but he's not close to doing anything.
Yeah, correct. But the question is with Tyler. I mean, does Tyler just stay at home and come over here? I mean, I guess it's just the easy thing to do. Obviously, Cooper will be here. Keyshawn will be in town. you'll have all your regular cast of characters that are here. Harrison Bailey will be up. So, for Tennessee, it's just about, trying to get some of these guys like in-state, like Trayvon Repka. Tennessee will continue to swing there until he ends up going somewhere else this weekend. Try to get him up here. Same thing with, Bryce and Eason. They're going to work hard to try to get Big O to come up here this weekend. They want to try to get all these in-state guys in town because they want to, just try to be a melting pot here and see if everybody wants to play together.
Doesn't sound like anybody's going to necessarily get in the car with Harrison right now. We'll see what happens. I mean, that could obviously change. But
Eric Gilbert's supposed to go to Clemson.
Right, Gilbert's supposed to go to Clemson. We'll see what BJ does, if he does anything. You've talked about West Coast kids this weekend. What do you think is going to happen there?
Well, and that's probably the two biggest names that are non-committed guys that are coming in here this weekend. But I look at those guys; they're not close. So when I talk about the main guys you want to watch are Whitehead, see what happens there, see if Tennessee pushes it all. Jalen Hyatt. But outside of that, you go out to Savell Smalls and Darnell Washington.
Which are probably the two big names.
Those are the two biggest names you can bring in, the 2 5-stars. Brian Niedermeyer is once again knocking it out of the park on the West Coast. Tennessee fans worry about losing Niedermeyer. I would never worry about losing Niedermeyer to a school in the SEC. I'd worry about losing Brian Niedermeyer to the West Coast. That's where he's from. He's making his hay out there. Somebody's going to take massive notice.
Not trying to pave the way from the league, but how much easier is it to recruit in the West Coast? Say just hypothetically, you're at Washington or USC. You're not recruiting against Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, trying to pull somebody from South Carolina's backyard. If you can, if I'm a coach and I can, as an assistant, can make the same kind of money, it's a no-brainer for me. I certainly hope he stays for Tennessee's sake, but golly, this is, I don't know if people appreciate how hard it is in this league, especially.
Oh, no, and harder now than it's ever been. There's an assumption that it's not that hard because Tennessee's done it in the past. I don't want to jump back down that rabbit hole necessarily with the Matt Hayes article, but the one part of that really wasn't illuminated in there is just how much more difficult it is to recruit, and it's not always been easy. Never was there a time when it's easy, but it's a lot harder to go to Atlanta and get kids now than it was, or North Carolina, or South Carolina.
I was going to say North Carolina. How many kids did Phillip pull from North Carolina, South Carolina? Heath Schuler, Dominique Stevenson. Maurice Staley didn't turn out to be. He didn't live up to the hype, but he was a huge. How many of those kids go to Clemson in this day and age?
Oh yeah.
How far is it from Bryson City to?
Yeah,
Clemson?
Where's the guy like
Jay Graham?
Yeah, where's the guy like Leonard Little going?
Yeah,
Sean Ellis. Darwin Walker, on and on and on right now.
Clemson the SEC's always been cutthroat, and it's more so now than it was with Georgia and Alabama being national title contenders at the same time. But the Clemson deal has added the degree of difficulties off the charts.
Yeah, it does. It certainly changed it a lot. So big weekend coming up this weekend. This is the final one, kind of the final.
Well, we push.
Right?
We're back open again, and then we go back closed a week from now because fall camp gets revved up. So yeah,
you can have some guys on campus, but this is the last real organized thing Tennessee's going to do.
Yeah, correct. Until official visits, which will be in the season.
Yeah, once you get into the season, then coaches obviously can go on the road starting September 1st. For observation, evaluation, into Friday nights and that type of thing. So big weekend for Tennessee. We'll see who all they can get in. You mentioned those names. Hyatt's a big deal. Whitehead. We'll see if Eason gets here. Those are 3 names that seem to be filling Tennessee pretty good, particularly Hyatt and Eason right now. So we'll see what happens with that going on. While the calendar opens up, Rob, in football and basketball, the calendar, I guess, is open a little bit more.
They have one. This is the last weekend for live evaluation periods, and again, it's one of those weekends where it's not, the shoe travel circuit. It's the organized high school team camps, which I don't think the coaches love. Again, I've explained it before, but these events only high school teams can go to. So if you want to go see PJ Hall this week, you're going to watch him play with his high school team instead of watching him play in a tournament where there's 50 other, high major kids, and you might
get in a game and there's only one guy to watch.
Yeah.
Whereas other games,
as opposed to
5 or 6.
Last week when I was in Birmingham, it's a facility with 12 courts, and there's probably there's 12 games going on at one time. There's probably 50 kids or more at any one time that you could just walk around and are high major players. But it's the coaches still have to get out, have to show their faces. So Tennessee will be looking at the usual list of suspects this weekend. And I think I probably have not mentioned this enough, but I think the way that Tennessee's going into this fall is with a firm list of 3 or 4 guys is a reflection of them being able to do their work. Where the first couple years they're scrambling, what you're seeing now is a result of being on kids for 2, in Jaden Springer's case, 3 years. I mean, it's a defined board, and I think guys have released their top 5. Springer obviously did. PJ Hall did on Friday. Those are guys that will both make official visits to Tennessee. Keon Johnson goes down in a little less than 2 weeks. That's obviously huge. You get that one nailed down before school starts, and suddenly you're all in on Springer, PJ Hall, and working to get Cam Hayes, who I've talked about, who's currently a 2021 kid, number 17 player in the Rivals rankings in the country. He's not going to announce his plans if he's going to reclassify until the spring, but Tennessee is certainly talking to him about that. So just, it's going to be a nice class, but I just can't see Keon going to Ohio State after having been there one time. So
better shot, Springer or PJ Hall?
That's a good question.
That is a good question. I would say PJ Hall, just because Springer is a North Carolina kid with a North Carolina offer, and that
it's hard to pass that. It's tough.
But he also has been at IMG. He will have been at IMG Academy for the past 2 years, not in his hometown of Charlotte. So I think that helps you a little bit. He's not going to school every day and having people talk about North Carolina all the time, or potentially playing for a high school coach who grew up loving North Carolina and working the camp every year, that kind of thing. So I think the IMG factor will make it a little easier for him to say no to North Carolina if that's what he wants to do. And PJ Hall, the one I worry about the most is Florida, just because his sister's there. Would make it so much easier for the family to travel. I don't dismiss Clemson at all. I think he really likes Brad Brownell. I wouldn't totally dismiss Virginia Tech just because of the tie there. His dad played at Wofford for the current Virginia Tech head coach. PJ's known him forever, but his dad's also from Kingsport, and I've met PJ a couple times, and he's definitely a Rick Barnes type of kid.
You've been to pals.
You can see him fitting in. I didn't ask him that. But
I bet he's had some Frenchy fries.
I bet he has. So,
and a double pile.
Again, I would say PJ is probably more likely, but
Salzburger.
I could see Tennessee ending up with both of them. I really could. PJ's sister. PJ's a 4-year player. His sister's not going to be there the whole time he is. She plays volleyball there. That might work out for a couple years for the family. But a lot easier to get. He's from right outside Spartanburg. If you guys anybody that's driven to Hilton Head, you've driven by that huge high school, Dorman High School, right off the interstate on 26 there. That's where he goes. So pretty easy 2.5-hour drive to Knoxville. So I think Tennessee's in the thick of it. It has the potential to be the best signing class that I can remember covering.
Let me ask you about the current team. I know they're in the gym working. Any nuggets, any notes?
Well, I've talked a lot about different guys, but I'll tell you one guy who's, they liked him in June, have really liked him even more in July is Camwa. Olivier Robinson Camwa was told by somebody who's been around workouts and everything within the last few days that just in terms of ability, he's one of the top 5 players on the team. Now, whether or not that means he's a starter based on lineups and matchups and things is, up in the air. But coaching staff really thrilled when they found him late. Rick didn't even see him in person until February. Ended up, pulling him. So that's a guy that's generating a lot of buzz.
It seems like the vibe of his competitiveness has translated into reality. Because that was kind of the talk. He loved to compete and kind of that.
Loves to work. Great work ethic, and that's
seems to have translated here easy.
Was talking to somebody on the staff not long ago, and again, everybody works hard in the summer, this, that, and the other, but was told that the attitude, the togetherness of this team, the way they work is the reason there's so much optimism. I think Rick is really excited about this season. I don't. Tennessee's almost certainly going to take a step back, but I don't think Rick feels for a moment like they're going to, be a non-factor in the SEC or an afterthought when it comes to NCAA tournament. He really likes this group of guys right now.
Well, and it's a credit to me as we wrap it up. It's a credit to the personality, the makeup of people that they've recruited. It's also a credit to you hear this overused word culture all the time. The fact of the matter is a culture was created by some guys who left, but they didn't take the culture with them when they left. It's created and it's transcended down to the underclassmen. You know, it was 2 years ago everybody talked about how hard Admiral and Grant were working and their work ethic and everything else. That's carried, you know, they passed that down, and it seems to have stuck.
And it's
with
impressive
those
because they got so many new faces in this program. I mean, transfers, freshmen, and I mean, I think a lot of it is when you got two seniors like Lamonte Turner and Jordan Bowden. That, you know, that's half the battle right there. I mean, guys who, you know, are kind of echoing your voice even when you're not around if you're the head coach.
Yeah, so we'll have plenty more on hoops as they continue to go through summer workout stuff, and obviously pointing towards the start of football as well. We'll have plenty more on that in the Friday podcast as Tennessee and recruiting has their big final weekend coming up on Saturday, and just a little over a week away from the start of fall camp. That's going to do it for this edition of the Volquest.com podcast. For Austin Price and Rob Lewis, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody.